Okay, no joke. I've recorded this like 40 times, so whatever happens this time doesn't matter. I'm sending it in. Tonight we'll be reading Stiff by Mary Roach. Heads up, it's a science comedy, I guess. I don't know. Nonfiction based on, not based, but about cadavers. So if you're squeamish about stuff like that, maybe just go back and read the bit with Morgan Freeman and Dr. Seuss. Here we go. Chapter 10, Eat Me. Medicinal cannibalism and the case of the human dumplings. It's not like I've practiced this 40 times in a row in the past hour. In the grand bazaars of 12th century Arabia, it was occasionally possible, if you knew where to look and you had a lot of cash in a tote bag you didn't care about, to procure an item known as mellified man. The verb to mellify comes from the Latin for honey, mel. The mellified man was dead human remains steeped in honey with an N. Its other name was human mummy confection, though this is misleading, for unlike other honey-steeped Middle Eastern confections, this one did not get served for dessert. One administered it topically, and I'm sorry to say, orally, as medicine. The preparation represented an extraordinary effort, both on the part of the confectioners and more notably on the part of the ingredients. In Arabia, there are men 70 to 80 years old who are willing to give their bodies to save others. The subject does not eat food, he only bathes and partakes of honey. After a month, he only excretes honey. The urine and feces are entirely honey, and death follows. His fellow men place him in a stone coffin full of honey, in which he macerates. The date is put upon the coffin, I don't know, giving the year and month. After 100 years, the seals are removed. A confection is formed, which is used for the treatment of broken and wounded limbs. A small amount taken internally will immediately cure the complaint. The above recipe appears in the Chinese Materia Medica, a 1597 compendium of medicinal plants and animals compiled by the great naturalist Li Shi Chen, which I'm probably not saying right, so I apologize to Li, homie. Li is careful to point out that he does not know for certain whether the mellified man story is true. This is less comforting than it sounds, for it means that when Li Shi Chen does not make a point of questioning the veracity of a Materia Medica entry, he feels certain that it is true. This tells us that the following were almost certainly used as medicine in 16th century China. Human dandruff, best taken from a fat man. Human knee dirt, human earwax, human perspiration, old drum skins, ashen applied to the penis for difficult urination, the juice squeezed out of pig's feces, and dirt from the proximal end of a donkey's tail. The medicinal use of mummified, though not usually mellified, humans is well documented in chemistry books of 16th, 17th, and 18th century Europe, but nowhere outside Arabia were the corpses volunteers. The most sought-after mummies were said to be those of caravan members overcome by sandstorms in the Libyan desert. Just can't get a break in Libya, you just can't. The sudden suffocation doth concentrate the spirits in all the parts by reason of the fear and sudden surprisal which seizes on the travellers, wrote Nicholas Lefebvre. I don't know, has an accent, I don't know how to say that. Author of Complete Body of Chemistry. Sudden death also lessened the likelihood that the body was diseased. Makes sense. Others claimed that the mummy's medicinal properties derived from the Dead Sea bitumen, a pitch-like substance which the Egyptians were thought at the time to have used as an embalming agent. Needless to say, the real deal out of Libya was scarce. Lefebvre offered a recipe for home-brewed mummy elixir using the remains of a young, lusty man. Other writers further specified that the youth be red-headed. The requisite surprisal was to have been supplied by suffocation, hanging, or impalement. A recipe was provided for drying, smoking, and blending 1 to 3 grains of mummy and a mixture of viper's flesh and spirit of wine. The flesh, but Lefebvre offered no hint of how or where to procure it, short of suffocating or impaling the young carrot top oneself. There was for a time a trade in fake mummies being sold by Jews in Alexandria. They had apparently started out selling authentic mummies ready from crypts, prompting the author C.J.S. Thompson in The Mystery and Art of Apothecary to observe that the Jew eventually had his revenge on his ancient oppressors. When stocks of real mummies wore thin, the traders began concocting fakes. Pierre Pomé, private druggist to King Louis XIV, wrote in the 1737 edition of A Complete History of Drugs that his colleague Guy de la Fontaine had traveled to Alexandria to have ocular demonstration of what he had heard so much of, and found, in one man's shop, all manner of diseased and decaying bodies being doctored with pitch, wrapped in bandages and dried in ovens. So common was this black market trade that pharmaceutical authorities like Pomey offered tips for prospective mummy shoppers. Choose what is of a fine shining black, not full of bones and dirt, of good smell, and which being burnt does not stink of pitch. A.C. Wooten, in his 1910 Chronicles of Pharmacy, writes that celebrated French surgeon and author Ambroise Paré, that's a name right there, claimed Ersatz mummy was being made right in Paris from desiccated corpses stolen from the I just lost my spot. Stolen from under the cover of night. Paré hastened to add that he never prescribed it. From what I can tell, he was in the minority. Pomey wrote that he stocked it in his apothecary, though he averred that its greatest use is for catching fish. C.J.S. Thompson, whose book was published in 1929, claimed that human mummy could still be found at the time in the drug bazaars in the Near East. Mummy elixir was a rather striking example of the cure being worse than the complaint. Though it was prescribed for conditions ranging from palsy to vertigo, by far its most common use was as a treatment for contusions and preventing coagulation of the blood. People were swallowing decayed human cadaver for the treatment of bruises. 17th century druggist Johann Becker, quoted in Wooten, maintained that it was very beneficial in flatulency, which, if he meant as a causative agent, I do not doubt. Other examples of human-sourced pharmaceuticals surely causing more distress than they relieved included strips of cadaver skin tied around the calves to prevent cramping, old liquefied placenta to quieten a patient whose hair stands up without cause. I'm quoting Li Shi-chen on this one and the next. Clear liquid feces for worms. The smell will induce insects to crawl out of any of the body orifices and relieve irritation. Fresh blood injected into the face for eczema, popular in France at the time Thompson was writing. Gallstone for hiccups. Tartar of human teeth for wasp bite. Tincture of human navel for sore throat. And the spittle of a woman applied to the eyes for ophthalmia. The ancient Romans, Jews, and Chinese were all saliva enthusiasts, though as far as I can tell, you can't use your own. Treatments would specify the type of spittle required: woman spittle, newborn man-child spittle, even imperial saliva, Roman emperors apparently contributing to a common spittoon for the welfare of the people. Most physicians delivered the substance by eyedropper or prescribed it as a sort of tincture, although in Li Shi-chen's day, for cases of nightmare due to attack by devils, the unfortunate sufferer was treated by quietly spitting in the face. Even in cases of serious illness, the patient was sometimes better off ignoring the doctor's prescription. According to the Chinese Materia Medica, diabetics were to be treated with a cupful of urine from a public latrine. Anticipating resistance, the text instructs that the heinous drink be given secretly. Another example comes from Nicholas Lemery, chemist and member of the Royal Academy of Sciences, who wrote that anthrax and plague could be treated with human excrement. Lemery did not take credit for the discovery, citing instead, in his course of chemistry, a German named Homberg, who in 1710 delivered before the Royal Academy a talk on the method of extracting an admirable phosphorus from man's excrements, which he found out after much application and pains. Lemery reported the method in his book. Take 4 ounces of human excrement newly made, of ordinary consistency. Homberg's fecal phosphorus was said to actually glow, an ocular demonstration of which I would give my eye teeth, which are useful for the treatment for malaria, breast abscess, and eruptive smallpox, to see. Homberg may have been the first to make it glow, but he wasn't the first to prescribe it. The medical use of human feces had been around since Pliny's day. The Chinese Materia Medica prescribes it not only in liquid ash and soup form for everything from epidemic fevers to the treatment of children's genital sores, but also in a roasted version. The thinking went that dung is essentially, in the case of the human variety, bread and meat reduced to their simplest elements and thereby rendered fit for the exercise of their virtues, to quote A.C. Wooten. Not all cadaveric medicines were sold by professional druggists. The Colosseum featured occasional backstage concessions of blood from freshly slain gladiators, which was thought to cure epilepsy. There's an asterisk. so we need to read it. If you could at all help it, it was extremely advisable historically to avoid being epileptic. Whoops. Did that stop? I hope that didn't stop. We'll keep going. Treatments for it have included distilled human skull, dried human heart, bullets of human mummy, boy's urine, excrement of mouse, goose, and horse, warm gladiator blood, arsenic, cod liver oil, and borax. In 18th century Germany and France, executioners padded their pockets by collecting the blood that flowed from the necks of guillotine criminals. By this time, blood was being prescribed not only for epilepsy, but for gout and dropsy. Another asterisk. While I am thankful to be alive in the era of antibiotics and over-the-counter Motrin, I am saddened by modern medicine's contributions to medical nomenclature. Where once we had scrofula and dropsy, now we have supraventricular tachyarrhythmia and glossopharyngeal neuralgia. Gone are quinsy, glanders, and farcy. So long, exuberant granulations and cerebral softening. Fare thee well, tetter and hectic fever. Even the treatments used to have an evocative literary flavor. The Merck Manual of 1899 listed a tumblerful of Carlsbad waters, sipped hot while dressing, as a remedy for constipation, and the lovely, if enigmatic, removal inland as a cure for insomnia. As with mummy elixir, it was believed that for human blood to be curative, it must come from a man who had died in a state of youth and vitality, not someone who had wasted away from disease. Executed criminals fit the bill nicely. It was when the prescription called for bathing in the blood of infants or the blood of virgins that things began to turn ugly. The disease in question was most often leprosy, and the dosage was measured out in bathtubs rather than eyedroppers. When leprosy fell upon the princes of Egypt, wrote Pliny, "Woe to the people, for in the bathing chambers tubs were prepared with human blood for the cure of it." I think we'll stop there. So there you go. Kind of creepy and weird. I might have to read another one that's not so weird, but I actually really enjoyed this book, so if you like science and bodies, I would read it. Thanks for listening.